What's your lemonade stand story?
And he was like, YouTube's going to be the next big thing, Devin. Like, you need to get on that. You need to get on it early. And I'm like,
And all of us, we all go through our own trials, our own level of stuff.
Sure hope this works out. Otherwise, this will be a huge waste of time.
I mean, what else is it all about other than just taking risks and continuing to try and grow and hopefully get better and better at making things?
Most of the billion-dollar brands you've seen were started by people that were just solving a problem for themselves.
We're telling lemonade stand stories from some of the world's top creators, makers, and go-getters.
We're rolling right now.
Hey,
We're having fun. We're rolling.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this podcast today is sponsored by Yalla, a task management and team collaboration software that we use at Lemonade Stand. We use Yalla to keep all of our team members organized, wherever they are. In fact, we used it to plan and organize this podcast. Visit yalla.team, that's YALLA.team, and try it for free. We also have a special offer for all listeners of this podcast. Use promo code LEMONADE and get a lifetime 25% off if you upgrade. What is going on, guys? This is Champ Barker with the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast, and today is a very special day indeed. A very, very special day. I want to almost take like a moment of silence, but we're not going to because this is a podcast and it would be awkward if I did. But across from me is the legendary Brandon Mull, and it's funny because we actually met not that long ago, honestly.
Yeah, not too long ago.
Not long ago at all, but we've become fast friends, and we have we've shared a lot of really cool experiences together already, and had some really cool discussions. And it's cool because we have our own unique creative spaces and everything like that. But even though I met you in person, not maybe a little over a month ago, I've known of your works for a while. It was actually interesting because my sister growing up loved your books, and she told me all about them, but I kept thinking, they're kids' books. I'm not going to read them. I'm an adult. But then my roommate in California also started swearing by your books, and I happen to love fantasy novels. I do. I think if it's a good storyline and everything like that, I can get into it. And my roommate, Christy is her name, and she was telling me that you incorporated really unique rules of magic in your show and in your books, not show. And I was like, okay, cool, because I've heard of Fablehaven for sure before. And so I started reading them, and I got hooked. I was just so hooked and so mesmerized. I'm like, dang, I'm so into this right now. And it really was a very, very sad day for me when I finished the 5th book. I knew that there was nothing left. I was like, oh no, what am I going to do with my life right now? So I started reading your other works, and then I got excited when you announced that there were other ones coming out or something like that. I think it was Dragon Watch was starting to come out. And so then I'm like, oh my gosh, the story continues, and it's been exciting. But yeah, Brandon, thanks so much, man, for being here and for sharing your talents with the world, because you've helped me a lot, and we're going to dive a lot into this as well. But yeah, thank you, man. Thanks so much for coming out.
Sure. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, that was so great. So the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast is about people's lemonade stand stories, right? So it's kind of like how they got started with their dreams or with their career or their passion or anything like that.
Sure.
And I know we've talked about this before, but you love writing, and you're that's what you wanted to do. So were you always a writer before, or were you trying to explore different paths and then finally decided, yeah, I'm going to be a writer now?
So as a little kid, I was this massive daydreamer.
Okay.
Right? It was very hard for me to focus in school. I was the kid that was on the side of the classroom, spinning the globe and looking out the window and just kind of getting lost in my own head. Yeah. And I wasn't dumb. No. I was learning and kind of listening at the same time, but man, I really just had a spacey mind, right? Maybe divergent thinking. My mind likes to go follow strange paths.
Sure.
And so I started off as a daydreamer, and because I like to daydream, I started making up weird stories in my head. And as those stories got more elaborate and more cool, I kind of wanted to share them with people, right? At first, I was content to just kind of play in my head. It was just a sandbox for me, right?
Yeah.
But I remember maybe around 10 or so, someone told me about the Narnia books.
Yeah.
And I'd never been into reading that much.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't like, okay, like I liked it when my parents would read a picture book to me. That was great.
Yeah.
But like if I had to read a thick book, I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
You know, like I've got a bike, I got other stuff to do.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah. We don't need to go overboard with this reading stuff.
Come on. Yeah.
But then the big imagination of Narnia really captured me. And it almost broke my brain, and I just wanted to live in Narnia in my head, right? So I would like do Narnia adventures in my head and imagine what that place would be like. Plus, I would read the books, but like the books were finite, but my imagination wasn't.
Sure.
And so I reached a point maybe in my teenage years where, okay, so let me say this: I was at Comic-Con in San Diego, maybe I don't know. 8 years ago, and I heard Peter Jackson talking to Steven Spielberg about filmmaking, and it was just awesome, right? Like
it's amazing. Yeah,
a room anybody nerdy would want to be in, right?
Of course, yeah.
And somebody asked Peter Jackson, "How did you become Peter Jackson? How did you become the guy who made Lord of the Rings and like knocked it out of the park?"
Yeah,
and he was like, "There's the stuff I was into when I was like a teenager," and he's like, I just stayed into it. I just stayed into it. I just kept loving it and kept getting better at it. And in a lot of ways that said really well kind of how my path went. Like there was the stuff I liked to daydream about like a little kid. And for some reason, as I grew up, I just still like to daydream about it.
Yeah.
And I reached a point where the stories in my head seemed cooler than the books I read and cooler than the movies I saw. And I was like, man, I think these are worth sharing if I could just share them.
Yeah.
So I tried to write them down.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first tried to write them down, it was so disappointing. Right? Because the story in my head was so cool.
It's so amazing.
And I looked what I wrote down and I'm like, wait, this is like, looks so dumb. And I was like, maybe I'm a simpleton.
Okay.
Yeah, like maybe like these stories are dumb and like they only seem cool to me because like on paper, they don't seem cool like the stories I like to read. And thankfully, eventually I sort of learned that, no, there's like an art to this, right? Like I could have cool stories in my head and be totally incapable of communicating them. And what I needed to learn was how to turn those stories in my mind into scenes, into individual scenes that I could write down and share with people. And so I started paying attention to how my favorite authors built their scenes, right? People like Tolkien and people like J.K. Rowling and people who are writing fun fantasy stories. And the more I paid attention to how my favorite authors built their scenes, the more I practiced building my own scenes, the better I got at it. And even so, like even as I got okay at writing, right? And in college, I ran a sketch comedy troupe that helped give me confidence in writing. Writing and performing sketch comedy was sort of like going to dialogue camp.
Yeah, for sure.
Think of how much of a novel is dialogue, right? And so, so my and the comedy troupe did well. We were like selling lots of tickets. And
I remember I was there.
That's good. Yeah.
I was there and it was it was so big and popular.
And so like, it was like, okay, well, at least something I write could like draw a crowd or like delight a crowd, make them laugh at least,
Yeah.
And that was really thrilling. And maybe it's good that didn't take off too much because I was really happy doing that. I probably could have been very happy just writing sketch comedy the rest of my life. But there was still something inside of me that really wanted to write these novels. And so when I got done with college, I started trying to write and submit stories. And my wife, we got married right at the end of college at BYU. And my wife gave me this gift where she was like, take a year and write your book. Right?
Wow.
And so we didn't have any kids yet, she just worked a day job. And I wrote this book and it was called The Other End of the Hippo.
Okay.
And it was weird. And it was about this kid that got swallowed by a hippo and that was his gateway to another world, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I shopped it around. Just nobody was interested at all.
Yeah.
Like nobody wanted it. And probably like maybe 2 years went by and it was just like, wow, this was just a bad idea because no one wants this. And I remember like just praying my guts out, like, am I just crazy? Like if I chosen a stupid thing? And I got a feeling like that book would be published. And in my heart as I was praying about it. And so I was like, well, that's a good sign. So maybe I'll trust that, and I sort of hoped that meant it would get published next week. For sure, that's not what it meant because next week came and went, what I mean? And so I ended up with a day job working for Excel Entertainment, which was kind of writing marketing stuff for an entertainment company. And that was okay. That was a cool job, but I sort of felt like terrible because I was like writing the summaries for other people's like movies and other people's books. I'm like, I want to be writing the movie. I want to be writing the book. I don't want to be writing like the summary on the back of the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
but it was still good to learn a little bit about entertainment marketing.
Yeah.
Right? And so after there was a guy at Excel who had a contact at a publisher and said, hey, you should check out, like this publisher mentioned, hey, we're looking for fantasy novels. Oh, you should check out Brandon Mull's fantasy novel. This publisher's called Shadow Mountain. They're here in Utah. And they gave him the other end of the Hippo.
Yeah.
And they read it and didn't want to publish it also.
Okay.
But they liked it enough.
Yeah.
That they're like, well, but we want to talk to the author. We want to see who this guy is because we like how he writes. It's just not the story we're looking for.
Sure, yeah.
And so I sat down with a guy named Chris Schobinger, and he said what he liked about my writing and said, this story isn't for us, but what else you got? And so I described to him a story that I had in my head about a secret wildlife park for magical creatures.
Huh.
And brother and sister who discover their grandfather's the caretaker of this, almost like a Harry Potter Jurassic Park mix or something, right?
Yeah. How did you come up with this idea? Was it just kind of always in your head or something like that, or?
There's always lots of stuff in my head. I'll die with so many untold stories, I promise.
Sweet, of course.
But this, I used to live in Connecticut. When I lived in Connecticut, my house was surrounded by trees. That was like 8th grade of my junior year. I would daydream, what if there's weird monsters out in the woods that were going to eat me and eat my younger siblings, especially, maybe. It's a common daydream,
common thing to think about. Yeah, for sure.
And I started, as I reminisced about that and thought about that, I was like, well, what if, why would there be monsters in the woods? Why would there be creatures in the woods? I was like, oh, well, what if all the magical creatures were hidden on these wildlife parks and these preserves, like almost like a zoo or a wildlife park? I was like, oh, that'd be interesting. And what kind of monsters would be there and creatures would be there and what kind of treasure would they be hiding and who would be interesting characters to discover them? And you just start asking yourself lots of questions about the premise. And for me, asking lots of questions about that premise, it turned into a playground in my mind and just kept building. And so that's kind of where Fablehaven originated. And when I mentioned this playground in my mind to Chris Schobinger, he's like, yeah, I'd like to see that. So the first time ever I'd had an editor say like, no, on purpose I want you to show me something.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
not like sliding it under the bathroom stall when you know. And so and so over the next 5 months, I was working my day job, and on nights and weekends I wrote Fablehaven.
Huh.
And I was.
What year was this? Would you say?
This was about 2006.
2006. Okay.
Right. Which to me seems not that long ago. If you're a kid, you didn't even exist back then.
No, so. I know you did not exist back then. 2006, I graduated college, BYU.
Yeah, there you go.
So I remember that. Yeah.
I wrote the book in 5 months and gave it to Shadow Mountain, and they were really excited about it.
Wow.
And at that time, actually, I had transferred over from Excel Entertainment to be the copywriter at Shadow Mountain.
Okay.
So I was in-house.
You're already there.
And so they were very flexible and giving me time off for book tour because I was working there for about a year, and then I quit my day job to pursue. So I was about 30 when I was able to finally quit my day job to pursue writing full time. And when I first quit my day job, it was like, maybe I'll be back in 3 months. You know what I mean? Like,
sure, of course.
I don't know how long this will last, right?
Yeah.
But so far, so good. About 15, 16 years and about 17 books on the New York Times list. And some of those have hit #1. And it's some of them are internationally popular. And weirdly, like Fablehaven's really big in Poland.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. I'm just kidding. It doesn't make sense at all. I don't know why I would. Yeah.
I think we've got got a terrific Polish translator.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This guy named Rafał, who I've met a few times. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like I go to Poland, I have big lines, man. Like
dude,
it's
that's
going well
amazing.
over there. And so it's so weird that this thing that it seemed like it would never get started. And then it just got, I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. Yeah. I describe it this way sometimes.
Yeah.
Becoming an author was a little bit like planning my own birthday party.
Yeah, I'm terrible at doing that, but yeah.
And it's like, you'd rather have other people plan your birthday party for you and have it be maybe a big surprise or at least not like a lot of hard work. But like also, it's nice to have a good birthday party.
Yeah.
And so like if planning the birthday party is what it takes, like maybe plan your birthday party and just make sure you have a good one, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was a little bit like that with the writing. It was like, please listen to me. Please look.
Yeah.
I've got these stories. They're so cool,
Yeah.
And then it was really exciting when it passed a point where instead of me pushing, it was like pulling me along, right? And people wanted me to tell more stories, and publishers wanted me to tell more stories, and they were willing to pay me, and it felt like a miracle. It still kind of feels like a miracle, because who gets to do like their favorite thing for their job, you know?
I'll tell you, like I've tasted a little bit of that, because my dream, I love telling stories as well, and my dream is acting, right? And I remember like, it's like audition after audition, you're pushing, but then you get to that breaking point where it's like somehow or other you didn't even realize it. It's like, but like I've done some shows, and then now you get requested, and it was funny. I was talking to my mom just earlier today, and she's like, "Hey, what commercial are you working on?" Because I'm gonna be working on something very soon, and I'm like, "I have no idea. All I know is I got the part," And she's like, "Okay, you know nothing." I'm like, "No, I have no idea. All I know is I'm just supposed to show up and go be in this thing." And it was just hilarious, because we were talking about this, and it's that kind of point where you get to that point where you like become successful. But here's the thing, like I go on Amazon and I just see just tons and tons and tons of authors like pushing out their books, their fantasy books, and some of them are successful, some of them aren't. But like your series they've sold worldwide, and they've sold millions of copies, you've done really well. What do you think it was for you that like made it so you became that success story? Because I think for every success story, there's a lot of not that success of a story, right?
It's a good question. And it was scary to go into writing, in college, I was, I'm a reasonably bright guy. I'm a reasonably intelligent person who probably could have taken several different routes. And I was thinking hard about lots of different routes. Like maybe this career path is more secure, or maybe this, career path is more time tested and like guaranteed that I'll make something. And it was really kind of a wrestle. And I'll be honest with you, like a lot of teachers, my own parents, a lot of people who were giving me advice were like, no, not writing. Like you've got so much promise. Like why would you why would you throw it all away to starve, Yeah. And I kind of had this, and it was in my own mind. I remember like dating and being like, what is my pitch going to be? Like, hey, you should totally get together with me, because
I'm gonna be a writer.
We are gonna starve.
Yeah. That's a great thing.
We're gonna starve, and our kids will starve. It'll be beautiful. Yeah. And so you're really weighing that. And here was the question that I would ask myself. I'd be like, okay, for a lot of people, choosing to be a director would be the wrong choice, and they'd just have this lifetime of frustration. But for Steven Spielberg, that's a really good call. He probably did more good, accomplished more, made more money, whatever measurement you want to use. He probably accomplished more by becoming a director than he would have by being a shoe salesman or something. You know what I mean? Like for him, he was the right guy for that. And that was the question. Like, am I one of these guys that could, maybe break through, or maybe like write something that would be meaningful to people, and that people would be glad I became a writer, like not just me,
Totally.
And each of us, as we anticipate a creative endeavor, a creative field, we kind of have to weigh that, right? Like, man, is it worth the risk? Is this what I'm really all about? Do I have to do this? Like, does it feel necessary to me? How important is this to me? And in the end, for me, I was like, there's a couple things. I only have one life, right? And as I thought about myself on my deathbed, I was like, what would my biggest regret be?
Yeah.
And for me, my biggest regret would be if I never pursued the writing thing. So I was like, I got to at least pursue it. Come on, if I'm already at 20 visualizing my deathbed and me being sad, I'm like, I got to at least take a stab. And then it was also just that assessment of, I think I have to be. Let's say this: if my mom had her way, I would have tried to become like a singer or something.
Yeah.
And that's because my mom really likes it when her kids are on stage.
Sure.
Right. And as I assessed myself as a singer, I was like, okay, like I can hold my own maybe in a high school play, but I'm just flat out not the next American Idol. I'm just not. You know what I mean? I'm okay. I'm serviceable, but I don't feel like I'm an outlier in that category. But when I thought about the writing thing and the imagination thing, the more I looked around, the more I looked at what was published, the more I looked at the people trying to make a go of it, I was like, I think I'm an outlier in this category. I think my imagination has a little extra horsepower. I think like in this category, I'm like the 7-foot tall guy who's also athletic. You know what I mean? Going out for basketball, right? Like I was like, I think, and I wasn't that for basketball. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I was a 6'3" guy who wasn't athletic. And so it just didn't make sense. Like but like the writing thing, I was like, I think in this arena, I think I can do well. But the only way to know that, like we judge ourselves by what we feel capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Others judge us by what we've done. Generally.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, can I produce? Can I produce what I think I can produce? Can I create something so that others can go, oh yeah, this guy's got talent. Yeah, this guy's telling a fresh story in a cool way, and his imagination's awesome. And so the first hurdle was to create something that I thought was cool, and that was the other end of the Hippo.
Yeah.
And when other people didn't think it was cool, that hurt my confidence a lot.
Sure.
But I loved it enough that I kept rolling, right? I kept going. And that book, The Other End of the Hippo, ended up becoming my Beyonders series.
Beyonders, right.
Which ended up debuting at #1 on the New York Times list. And so that was like a total rags to riches for that story, right? Like it was like, looked like no one wanted it.
And now it's like #1, right? Yeah.
And it hit #1 and it did very well. And for some adults, it's still their favorite series of mine. And guess what? The Other End of the Hippo needed a serious rewrite. You know what I mean? It didn't get published as was.
Yeah.
But like after I wrote the Fablehaven books, I learned a lot, went back, did a rewrite, and I had a much better story and it sold really fast. Mm. So why were they successful? Right?
Yes.
Like what made this thing successful? I think part of it was that before I got published, I got good at it. That helped. Like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like I got published at the right time. I think if Other End of the Hippo, as it first showed up, had gotten published right like that, might have been a whole different story because it wasn't quite there yet. I think there was a reason it didn't get published. I don't think the people who didn't publish it, I don't think they were wrong. Right. You know what I mean? I think they were right. I think when I rewrote it, it should have been published. And I think probably on the first pass, it might not have been there yet. You know, it was a manuscript with potential that hadn't been realized yet. So part of it was getting good before I put my stuff out there. So I was putting out quality stuff. And then part of it was I really believed in it and pushed it hard on my own. When I say pushed it hard on my own, I spent maybe 5 months out of the year on the road visiting schools, libraries, bookstores, you know, like getting in front of people. Because here's the thing, like if you're a writer, this finish line that you're looking for like years is like, I'm going to publish a book. I'm going to publish a book.
Yeah.
And then you cross that finish line and I published a book and nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
And nobody knows who I am or who it is. And you realize that finish line was just a starting line.
Yeah.
And like most finish lines are, right? It's the finish of one thing and the start of another. And so suddenly I was at the start of this whole new endeavor of I got to let people know this book exists. And then, I mean, you can let people know the book exists all day, but it has to have enough, it has to kind of fulfill the contract to the reader enough. Like it has to be a good enough ride, a good enough experience that when you finally do cajole someone into picking it up, they go, oh, I'm glad I did. Like, this is good. And they like tell a friend. And if someone reads a book and likes it enough to tell a friend they should read the book, you will have a writing career. And I think that's the fundamental seed, you know. And I think it's very similar in a movie, right? Like
absolutely,
you go see a movie, you like it enough that you tell your friends they should see it. If that's going on, if you do some initial marketing, it'll probably be a success. Yeah. And so I put in the work to do the initial marketing, and the book was fun enough and interesting enough that it kind of worked, and it worked for both kids and adults in a Harry Potter kind of way. Yeah. I think that helped. It kept the audience nice and broad. Families would read it together and kind of bond over it, and I still make good money on Fablehaven, you know, and that came out amazing. That series was 2006 to 2010 and it still helps me pay the bills. It, you know, it keeps selling, and that's something you can't control, but you hope if you write something, you write something that's really meaningful to you. Right? Write something that you think is like the coolest thing ever, that you think is so cool. And then you just hope it's contagious. And if it's contagious, it'll just kind of... If other people agree, if there's other like-minded people who go, that's cool. It can have legs in ways that you can't control, and it can reach places you can't control. I had no control if it was going to go do well in Europe or something. You know what I mean? I had no control over
Poland or something. Yeah.
And then it was like a bestseller in France, it was a bestseller in Poland, and it got into, you know, it's in over 30 languages, and that was beyond where I was looking. Like that was beyond expectations. Yeah. So it was sort of like work hard, make a good product, and do everything you can think of to let people know about it, and you know, put in the sweat to make the product good, put in the sweat to let people know about it, and then wear your marketing hat, wear your author hat, and for me to make life well-rounded, wear your dad hat. And, you know, I've got 4 kids, and then we added 7, so now it's 11. So
Yeah, I mean it's a natural fit. You know, after you have 4, you should have 7 more.
You're like, you know what? This is so great. Like, let's just add 7.
Let's just add a couple more.
Let's just go for it.
Yeah, let's just go for it. Dude, you know what's interesting? I was just thinking about this when you were speaking. We live in a world that's just like full of like just flashes, like tons of social media, just tons of different things, products doing this doing that, and everything like that. So it's like getting someone to now spend their entire attention away from all of that and into a book is a massive feat, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, whatever the story is that's being presented, it's got to be so engaging and so engrossing and so powerful that you're like, hey, you know what? I love where I'm going in this journey. So much so that I want to put my phone down, unless you're reading on your phone, which I did. But it's like, it's like putting that down and all that stuff just to get involved and engrossed in the story. And I love like the Kendra and Seth character, and I can relate to both of them in certain ways. And sometimes I'd be like, Seth, you idiot, come on, like don't do that, like that's like the wrong thing to do. But then the fact that I was getting emotionally invested in his decisions, and I'm like, well, I understand why he was doing his decisions, but still it was irksome to me. It was so interesting, like how I would feel that way.
There's a lot of parents who wanted to like discipline or spank Seth. Yeah. Right? Like, and there's a lot of kids who are like, yeah, I would have done that. Yeah. And by hearing those two voices, I was like, I nailed this character, because that's exactly who I was aiming for, right? Like, totally. Like a plausible kid who's that kind of recklessly curious kid. Yeah. Who's also the kind of kid that parents are like, oh man, come on, you're making so much trouble that's unnecessary. Yeah. Why are you doing this?
Why are you making a pact with a demon? Why are you doing this right now? And I know it's just
as kids will do.
As kids will do, as adults sometimes do too, unfortunately. Yeah. So what's interesting though, I know, and we've talked about this at length, was your desire to share light, and to really be like a force for good. And really, Fablehaven, when you think about it, at the very end of the day, it's all about like choosing the good, choosing the light, and like letting that overcome darkness. And like, the Fairy Queen represents that, right? And then, and Kendra's connection to the Fairy Queen represents that idea of like choosing light and letting that be a part of you, and what can happen in someone's life. And I think that universal truth applies to everybody. It doesn't matter like what religious background you're from, or even if you have a religion, or just whatever you believe. Like there's something deep within your soul that's like, I associate with that, I connect with that. Like that to me is like a fundamental truth. So I love like how you're able to like kind of weave truths in through these like incredible fantasy stories, which is what's awesome. And see, here's the deal. I love movies. I love acting in movies. It's super fun for me. But I also know that movies are such an intense process, because it's like with movies comes budgets, and it comes like, can you pull this off? Can you do this? Can you do that? And so sometimes the stories you want to tell in movies, you just can't, just because of the fact that there's a huge budget involved in creating something like this. However, with writing books, I think it's kind of like the world is your oyster. It's like your imagination is your oyster, basically, right?
Yeah. You're really only limited by what you can imagine and describe, right?
Exactly, which I think is awesome. So now, with Fablehaven being so successful, Dragon Watch came along, and like that was like a really awesome thing. And so I started reading the Dragon Watch books, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy and good. And then like some of the books, I think it was like the third book ended on a pretty big cliffhanger, Yeah. And I'm like, why did that happen? Why did he forget everything? And then it's like the fourth one was like, or I don't know. Maybe I'm being mistaken. Maybe the third one was.
Second one might have been.
Second might have been, and then the third one was like finding Seth back or whatever. But the thing was, that's a whole other series, and it has like a whole different feel, like the same characters, but it's like a different thing that they've kind of grown up a little bit more, and the themes become a little bit more. I don't want to say like more adult, but it's like a little bit more like,
for sure, more intense.
More intense, for sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know like the sequel, the final book of that series, I believe, is coming out.
Yeah, that's right. So
yeah,
I finished Fablehaven in 2010.
Okay.
And when I finished it, I'd kind of used up all my ideas. I more or less thought I was done.
Right.
In Fablehaven, we had introduced the idea that among the different types of wildlife parks for magical creatures, we have dragon sanctuaries. And we visited Dragon Sanctuary in book 4 of Fablehaven.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best parts of the series. It
was so good.
It's kind of a larger, more dangerous sanctuary, and you've got these, you don't have things as big as dragons at Fablehaven. It's a little bit of a smaller wildlife park for magical creatures.
Yeah.
And as I thought about the story and I thought about what I'd left behind, I just started thinking, man, you know what? We spent so many books all at one little wildlife park called Fablehaven, and we didn't really do a lot of time at the big wildlife parks, the dragon sanctuaries. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I want to tell some stories there. I think there's space for stories. And I also thought about my main characters. And I was like, we didn't really leave them off in a place where their stories were over.
Yeah.
I felt like we left them off in a place where they'd accomplished some goals they wanted to accomplish, but they were still kind of involved with all sorts of trouble and problems, like as individuals. And I was like, you know what? Like let's just make a second half. So Dragon Watch 1 through 5 is the second half of Fablehaven, and it finishes the stories of Kendra and Seth that Fablehaven begins. And I think when you get to the end of book 5, I've written it, so I know this. I think when you get to the end of book 5, what you're really getting is the finale of Dragon Watch and the true finale of Fablehaven. Like it really functions now as like a 10-book series, broken into 2 halves. And I think the more interesting, complex, fascinating half is Dragon Watch. I mean, I really think I've grown as a writer, and I think I took everything I learned about those characters in the first series and wrote, if anything, a better series. And that was my goal from the start. I was like, if I'm going to go back to Fablehaven, this is like maybe my most iconic series I've written. Yeah. I was like, if I want to go back to that, what's been maybe my best received series, I was like, I don't want to go back and like end with a whimper or something. You know what I mean? I want to go back and like disappoint everybody. I was like, I can only go back if it's better. I mean, part of what makes Fablehaven good is the series crescendos and gets better as it goes.
Oh my gosh, that end battle sequence in the last book of Fablehaven was just epic.
And so like, I was like, I gotta, Dragon Watch has to crescendo from where Fablehaven left off. And so, it doesn't start at a crescendo. It takes some time to build a crescendo, but I think people who read books 4 and 5 of Dragon Watch will see some of the best stuff I've ever written, like a really interesting, fascinating roller coaster ride of fantasy craziness. And you mentioned that part of the goal is to put some light into the stories, and that is true. It is, I feel like I've found a way to reach young readers. And I found a way to reach families. And I think that what comes with that is responsibility that after they read the book, I want them to be left with something worthwhile. Totally. A beautiful aspect of fiction is you can use a made-up story to tell true things. Yeah. You can use a fantasy story to say true things about life and about good principles and about character and about family. So I try really, really hard, hopefully not in a preachy way, but I want conscientious characters making tough choices in such a way that good themes boil up, right? And true principles bubble up out of that. And so it's really important for me, like if I'm doing any good for the world, I'm trying to get kids reading, get them reading for fun so that their imaginations get strong. Yeah. The process of visualizing a story in your own mind puts you inside the story in a way no other medium can do, right? Because like as you read a book, you are forced to be a co-creator with the author, right? All you've got are words on the page. So to really see it, you have to go inward.
You have to create from your own imagination, right?
And that process, it can't help but make an imagination strong. Yeah. And it can't, and like, I love, like Emerson said, a mind stretched by new ideas never returns to its original dimensions. And so I love the idea of using fantasy to help young readers expand their imaginations and expand their view of what might be possible or conceivable by giving them books that are as big a action-packed roller coaster ride as a movie, but where they have the responsibility to bring it to life inside of themselves. Yeah. Because as you do, you can't help growing yourself. You can't help growing your own mind.
I in that way, I actually like books more than movies. And I love movies, but I really do love books because it's like, I'm creating this with my own imagination. And what's cool is when you have created your own, when you've used your own imagination and have figured out a way to describe it, and I was reading it, I remember thinking, like, I don't know, like all these different principles and ideas, and I could just keep going on and on because I love your works, but like the description and like the world that he gets, like that Seth gets into, and like the world of fear and darkness, and how he has to choose the light over that, and how he has to face his own fears, even getting like that, I believe like the sword in the last book, you know, like having to like face like those, like all those things that could be terrifying to him, you know, and how he has the courage to do that. Especially after he made such a big blunder with the demon. And then like, then there's the Dragon Watch series. I forgot the way you're describing like the magic, but it's like somehow it's like the more like these kings, I think it was Celebrant as the human form, was like going on some path. It like the time kept stretching, or the distance kept stretching further and further away. And I'm just like, I remember reading and being like, how in the world can anyone come up with something like that? Like it just like your imagination allowed you to come up with that, but yet by you doing that, you've suddenly given access to me to do that.
Right.
You know,
it's really weird and cool. And it's weird and cool that I can hop around the country to different libraries and different schools and bookstores. And I can talk to kids and adults who know who Seth is and have opinions about him, right?
Yeah.
And who know, and who like want to visit Fablehaven because they see it in their heads in a clear way.
Yeah.
And it's so neat that this thing, that my goal was to take this story that seemed cool to me and share it with people, and to realize, it's like living in other people's minds, and there's people playing like they're Kendra, or playing like they're Seth in their backyard, or imagining what if that butterfly is a fairy, or you know what I mean? Like, and the thought that you can share ideas in a way that like makes an impact on someone else's brain or mind or life. And sometimes I'll get kids or adults coming up to me going, "Hey, your book helped me like to read." Like when I read your book, it made me start to like reading. Yeah. And like that's, I know what Narnia meant for me, because that was the book that made me start to like reading. And I go, oh, if that was like their Narnia, that's big. Like
that's huge.
Because what Narnia did for my life was big. Like it opened up reading. It opened up education in a way that might not have opened up if I didn't learn to love to read and to turn words into meaning in my head. Yeah. And so like there are sometimes days and moments where I have encounters with readers that make me go, oh yeah, this was worth doing. You know, like even aside from, hey, this helped me pay my bills through life or whatever.
Totally.
But it did some good. And that's, I think any of us are kind of hoping that something we do can matter or do some good for somebody else, you know?
Oh man. I mean, I already know for me, like it was like life altering, you know? And that's the beautiful thing of like reading some of those books, is like to be in a place and to like, not just understand the magic and stuff, because like that's like the beautiful, awesome parts of it, but then to relate to the characters in such a way in different aspects. Like sometimes I related to the Warren character, sometimes I related to Dale, you know, sometimes I related to, you know what I mean? Like you have all these different things that you're like relating to for different parts of your life. But then it was interesting too, because I read Beyonders, and I also read Five Kingdoms, and I loved Five Kingdoms. You know, I was like, man, like what every world was its own like universe, you know, with its own rules. And I'm like, of course, that's awesome, right?
Yeah, Five Kingdoms was a fun challenge, because I was trying to do a really large feat of world building with that series, right? I mean, our premise is we have these kids that get kidnapped into another world, right? And in this other world, there's kind of 5 different kingdoms. Each kingdom has different magic that works there. Yeah. So if you got this really great magic sword in one kingdom, you might go to the next kingdom and find it no longer functions, right? Yeah. Because the magic is so different from kingdom to kingdom. But these different kingdoms let me set up, you know, one kingdom where magic has been used to develop advanced technology that only works in that kingdom, or another kingdom that has connections to kind of a fantasy version of the afterlife, and so forth. Like it was like 5 different magical worlds in one book, right? And each of the books kind of focused on one of those worlds. And I built a really big, cool ride, I think. You know,
my gosh, it was incredible. And again, by the end of it, like I feel like I went on this epic journey. Like I personally went on this journey. When I'm done, it's like I don't know if I'll ever be the same. And that's the beautiful thing, is like you allow readers the opportunity to go on these things and never be the same. How is Dragon Watch? I'm sorry, we're going back to Dragon Watch, but how is Dragon Watch being received right now?
People are digging it. You know, I think like the feedback I get on it is super positive, which is a huge relief, right? Because I was like, oh man, I don't want to write something and have it disappoint anybody, you know?
Yeah.
And like, you know, I'm sure it'll disappoint some people because that's life.
That's just life, yeah.
But in general, what I'm hearing back from the readers who liked Fablehaven was they're like pretty thrilled about it. And so that's relief. And I think if anything, it's just some people don't realize it's like the continuation of Fablehaven. Like some people don't get that it's like, no, like it's legit, like same main characters.
Yeah,
and stuff.
same characters.
I think maybe they imagine like, oh, this is like Kendra's grandson or something, or maybe that it has very little to do. But like it feels like, I mean, when you finish Dragon Watch, it feels like you've read a 10-book series. I mean, it really is like the second half of Fablehaven. So like marketing wise, I'm trying to help people understand that because the reactions have been really positive from those who have found it, and it's sold well. I mean, like it was the #1 selling hardcover in the country, and it was like we've had some of the books in the series hit #1 on the Times list, and so it's not like it's not doing poorly. But I also know I often will talk to Fablehaven readers and be like, oh, do you know that there's a sequel series to Fablehaven? They're like, wait, a sequel series?
Yeah.
And maybe I messed up by not calling it Fablehaven. You know, by calling it Dragon Watch, it sounds like it's something else. But but I didn't want to call it like Fablehaven Book 6.
Yeah,
because it was like too many years later, and people who had like kind of read the whole series, and I wanted to, oh yeah, by the way, you haven't read the whole series. Like that just felt cheap to me, so I just made it like its own thing, like a separate sequel series.
Like a sequel series. No, I think it's awesome, and I love it. I think like the fact that you're able to do that is great. And I guess I know book 5 is coming out. We discussed it was like October 26th, I believe, is
that's
the
right.
date
that's the
that
release.
is coming out. What is your hope with that series, with the finale of that series? What is your hope with it all?
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that I hope readers go, that was such a good ride.
Yeah.
I hope they walk away feeling like, man, there was like some meaning there. Like he said some things that kind of matter to me, that made sense to me in the story. But most of all, I just want readers to be like, oh, I'm so glad I took that journey.
Yeah.
Like when you say that a book is a journey, that's, I think, one of the big takeaways we can get from any good book is that like when in life, when we embark on anything that's hard, that there's a journey there, right? And if we get through it, sometimes that journey's over, but what's left is that we learn something, you know, like on that journey, and we come back from that journey changed a little bit, right? Like, I mean, there's been books written on this subject, like the hero's journey, right?
Sure.
And I hope that people who read Fablehaven and Dragon Watch feel like they went on this big journey where they vicariously experience all sorts of amazing things, and hopefully it leaves them changed a little bit, you know, like without taking any real risk, you know, just the risk, I guess, of time and effort. Like they get to go fight monsters and battle evil and do some over the top things that they might never get a chance to do in their normal life, you know.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's powerful. In fact, it was funny. I was talking to a friend of mine just the other day, and she used to nanny these kids, and so she said she just barely started reading Fablehaven. She's like, I like it more than Harry Potter. Like I just like I
well,
can't believe.
Compliment, yeah.
And that's what she was saying. She's like, I can't believe it's been. So, I've heard about these books. I can't believe I just barely started reading them. You know, and I was like, yeah, it's true. Like they're so good. No, we just mentioned journey, and I wanted to shift the topic of the podcast a little bit. Part of the Lemonade Stand stories that we discuss with guests and just with everyone is just like, look, in life, just individually, we are all dealt lemons. That's a part of our life journey.
Yeah.
We're dealt blows that are just like, wow, I did not see that one coming at all. And then being able to somehow turn it into lemonade is like the way you can like learn from it and keep growing, right? Is there anything in your own life that's been like, that was a tough lemon? That was a really, really tough one.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, like for me, it's almost, it's still present. I'm still living with it, right? Like I never pictured I would get divorced. You know, like I just never pictured that would happen. Like when I say never pictured, I almost like if you would have told me when I was young, I'd be like, oh, for sure I won't get divorced, for sure. Cause I'm all in on this idea of like this family that could maybe be forever, like that will just stay together forever. And so when I went through a divorce, because guess what? Like no one would have chosen probably to have their leg blown off by a mine or something. No one's going to choose that. And sometimes it happens, right?
Yeah.
And if a tragedy happens, something that really is really hard for you and something you maybe would have never chosen in a vacuum, or like if you had control of everything, all you can do is what you're describing, right? Try to find the good in it. Try to or if there's not tons of good in it, try to make it through in spite of it. You know what I mean? And so for me, it was some years of feeling like, I mean, I'll tell you, when that divorce went through, I kind of felt like my life was over. I was like, this was sort of everything that I was banking on for my life, and this was what I wanted out of life was this family. And I was kind of done in a special way. And it just, I looked at like all the books I'd written, and I looked at like anything physical I'd done, like the house I bought, I love that I had a house. Because as a young writer, I was like, I'll probably never live in a house. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I was like, I'll probably never be able to afford a house as a writer. And like, it was like a miracle. Like, hey, I live in a house, and I did it writing books. Yeah. But like, I looked at my career, I looked at my house, I looked at all those physical things in my life, and they just didn't mean anything. It just didn't mean anything. Like I took no joy out of it at all, like no satisfaction out of it. And I felt like I'd lost the thing that most mattered to me, and it kind of made everything else turn gray or turn to ashes or something. And so like I really felt done. And there, it was a time when I felt like prayer partly is what helped pull me out. Like I really reached out for help, and I was so broken inside that I didn't know if I would get help. You know what I mean? I didn't know if
that your level of brokenness could ever be healed.
Yeah, I just didn't know. Like, cause it felt so done. It felt like scars that were like, these scars will be here forever. Like, this is an eternal damage. And I think it even might have been true if I hadn't had help, but I really felt like God responded, and I really felt some healing that I can't explain, except that it felt like God gave it to me. You know, it felt like a gift, and it got me back on my feet, and it showed me that, hey, maybe it could be okay. And a few years later, I found an amazing new companion, like someone, and that's how we added 7 kids to the family, right? Like this woman named her Lynn, and of course that brings its own challenges, right? Like that brings its own, adding 7 kids and trying to blend them with the 4 kids and trying to like manage that big household. And it's a special kind of busyness and a special kind of crazy, and especially after there'd been some years where I was way too alone, like painfully alone.
How long were you alone for before you?
And I had my 4 kids.
Yeah.
But I only had them, a few days a week. And so those days when I didn't have my kids, it was like, whoa, like just me. Like I felt like a ghost roaming my house. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I just felt really like a kind of alone I didn't like after having had that full house with that family for so long. And so, like at the same time as it's a little too busy some days. Like, for example, like the stepkids were on their way to school today and they got a flat tire, and so I had to go drive some of them to high school. And
oh my gosh!
And my wife drove some of them to elementary school, and it was from Highland to Mapleton, so like a 40-minute drive.
No way!
It was all just like a very crazy morning. But guess what? It wasn't. It wasn't lonely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And in a way that for me works. And hey, if some people like being alone and like the solitude, hey, I sometimes like solitude too. Like I get that. But it was a certain flavor, a certain kind of loneliness that I'm kind of glad is gone, because I'll take this busyness over that loneliness. I'll take it. And I feel myself coming back to life in ways that I didn't think I could. And it's nice to know that you can be really done and really almost dead inside, and there are powers that can bring you back to life. And make you happy to be alive again. And that's hopeful and cool. And I hope I can, as a writer, you're trying to take everything you learn from life,
of course, and
bring it into the stories you tell. You almost can't help bringing it into the stories you tell. And I hope some of that shows up toward the end of Dragon Watch. I hope some of that shows up in future books. I'll probably never literally write that experience, but some of the principles I'm learning, I'll dress it up in fantasy costumes and have a lot of fun with it, maybe.
Well, it's so interesting. Like sometimes on our brokenness, what we really are realizing is our heart is broken, but it's actually broken open. And
that's a good point.
You know what I mean? And when your heart is broken open, it's like that's when like you can really feel that hand of God, that love, like kind of reach in and like and like lift you up and like raise you up and like and help you be filled. And it's interesting. Like I shouldn't even be talking about this, but I'm going to anyway. It's about my mom, but my mom like it went through an arranged marriage, and so she got married without choice. Really, she had no choice in the matter, and she knew my dad for maybe an hour, and they got married.
Wow.
It was crazy.
It's amazing to think about that, right?
It's crazy, right? Yeah, and so then in when was it? In the early 90s, they got divorced, and that was a pretty crazy time for everybody. For me, I was the oldest, and anyway, so that was a crazy time. And then she got remarried, and everyone told her, "Don't get remarried to this guy," but she did, and she wanted to. She really loved him, and it was a pretty terrible marriage, and a lot of tough things happened. And she ended up getting divorced again. But through him, she had her daughter, who's my sister, and now my sister has one baby and another one on the way any day now. And so I'm like, well, look at the miracles. Look at the miracles that happened because of that decision, right? My mom swore off like marriage and dating. She's like, nope, that was just so painful. And she allowed that brokenness to like just stop her. So she got divorced her second time in 2002 and just was like, never again, and she just wouldn't even entertain it.
Yeah.
But after years and years of like this loneliness and this pain of like feeling like I don't have anybody, she was telling me that her friends kind of coaxed her to being like, look, you've been alone for so long, and your kids are grown up now. Why don't you like give online dating a shot? She's I don't know what to do about that. So this year they put her profile up online, and the first couple people that all responded to her were all scammers, total scammers. To a woman that's already been like so beaten up and broken, she's like, no way, I'm not doing this again. And so she said she went to church, and she decided to delete the app, and she's just crying during her church service about like, why God, like why has my life been like this? I've tried to be a good person, tried to do good things, and why have I not been able to find this companion? And in the middle of church service, while she's crying, she happens to get a message from someone right before she cut the profile off. And so that message came through. And this man happens to be someone in Alabama, and he's just like kind of going through his own divorce, his own pain, all this stuff. But anyway, they connected on a deep level, and now they're like dating,
Yeah,
and it's
that's
just like,
great.
it's just the craziest thing. And I'm like, and my mom was telling me about it, and like he's come and visited us, and he's awesome, and his kids are great, and I'm just like, dang, And last night I remember going to bed after I talked to my mom last night. I went to bed with like a smile on my face, and I'm just like, man, there are incredible miracles that can come into the lives of people if they realize that even though they're broken, their hearts are just broken open.
Yeah, that idea of being broken open is powerful. And it makes me think of like, there's invitations in the scriptures, bring me a broken heart and a contrite spirit. And sometimes you don't pause and think like, wait, broken heart? Like that would be painful. That'd be really hard, right? And yet I know for me, it was when my heart was literally broken and smashed.
Yeah.
No, I guess not literally, or I would be dead.
You'd be dead.
But
you would be dead.
When my heart was metaphorically broken and smashed.
Yeah.
like it was in that, when in that state, I turned that state to God, like asking for help. It seemed like that was what worked the most wonders in my life of anything that ever happened. Like as far as me growing as a person, or as far as me feeling like God really cared about me and sent healing, like that was in a way where I feel like, wow, I feel sure he's there now, and I couldn't have said that when I was a little boy, like that I was this sure as I am now, because I felt what seemed to me like very, very real help. And so for me, even though it was so brutal and like a nasty lemon, like beautiful stuff grew out of it for me, and for the way I see the world, and for the hope that I have, like it worked wonders for me.
That's, oh my gosh, that's such an amazing experience. And I'm so sorry you had to like experience like such a wrecking ball, but yet at the same time, not in a morbid way, but I'm grateful that you experienced it, only because it's like, now the results of it is you have a beautiful wife, you've got like all these wonderful kids, and you feel full of life again. you feel purpose in your life, where things just feel, and you're constantly growing and learning, and it's just so awesome.
And you know what? I wouldn't wish that wrecking ball on anybody.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish on anybody. And because I've lived a little while, I know everybody will have their wrecking balls. It might not be the same one as mine, but if you live on this planet, you're going to have some. And I wish you well if when that wrecking ball hits, if you can, instead of raging at the universe, if you can go to a humble, quiet place and try to really reach out in sincerity, you might discover that wrecking ball is there to renovate you.
Upgrade you.
Yeah, upgrade you. Build something better than was there the first time.
Absolutely. I love that. That's so great. So, Brandon, let me ask you this. What brings you joy right now?
What brings me joy? I take a lot of joy out of my favorite relationships. You know what I mean? I take a lot of joy from my relationship with God. I take a lot of joy from trying to do really good work and share it with people. It's sometimes I get people that come up to me. It's very frequent. Like, you probably hear this all the time, but I like your books.
Yeah.
And the thing that you don't have to say, you probably hear this all the time. Like I am happy. Every person that likes those books that I hear about, it makes me so happy. Like it really is, because you write these books alone, right?
Yeah.
Like it's almost like in theory that someone else is going to read them, because I read it alone at my house in a room. Like, it's the least glamorous thing ever. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the most most in your sweatpants behind closed doors.
Right.
Like
there's no glory in that,
No, there's no fanfare. There's no
Yeah.
And I share with a few people, and it's almost unreal that then I might meet someone at the grocery store or go out to an event or have someone say, hey, that I like that book. That mattered to me. And it's like, oh, wait, when I'm alone doing that, it's actually, it doesn't feel like I'm communicating. Partly because I did sketch comedy, right?
Right.
Guess what? You get on a stage and you tell a good joke, or you dramatize something funny, the audience laughs, instant feedback. It's like the love's right there.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool feeling. It's so immediate. And writing is like the opposite. Writing is like you tell a joke and wait a year and a half for the laugh.
Yeah.
That you get in a letter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that reaction takes a long time to find you. But,
totally.
And so when it comes flowing in, I take a ton of joy in when people have found benefit in those crazy books I'm writing in my basement or wherever.
Dude, I feel like sometimes the same way about movies. Because look, when you're actually to think of making a movie, it is not glorious or glamorous at all.
That makes sense.
You're sometimes you're shooting at all hours of the night. We shot this one movie that we're still working on, and it's just there's still so much more work. It's just when you think okay, we're done with this huge hurdle, we realize, oh my gosh, so many more hurdles left, and you're still going. But man, I'll tell you what, when you see the final product and you can see other people really enjoying that final product, what a beautiful feeling that feels. You're like, wow, all the effort. And I guess writing books is kind of such a solo type of thing sometimes.
Yeah.
I guess movies are
very collaborative.
They're very collaborative. So at least you have the team that you're that family that you're creating things with. But at the end of the day, you're okay, please let the world, be grateful for the collaboration that we made,
Yeah,
so
there's something,
challenge,
there's something so hopeful about creating anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You almost can't create anything without some hope or some faith that someone will like it. Someone will be glad you did, and hopefully that first someone is yourself. You know what I mean? Hopefully you'll be like, I'm glad I made this, know? But what a beautiful feeling when someone else can go, hey, good job. I'm glad you made that too. That there's validation there that's pretty special.
No, it's so perfect. It's great. Okay, 2 more questions for you. What is the thing that makes you fear the most right now?
What makes me fear? I try really hard. I'm trying really hard to tame my fears, right?
Okay.
Because I am learning that simply by fearing tends to attract bad stuff.
Totally.
If you really give into a fear in a big way, it seems like you're almost begging it to come true a little bit.
Yeah.
And so to some extent, maybe I'm afraid of being afraid. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I don't want to have too much fear. Like I'm trying to fight down my fears.
Yeah.
But what are things that can make me worry? I mean, all sorts of stuff can make me worry. Like, we're planning to do a big launch party in October. And I love doing those events. We get a bunch of readers out and we put on a big show for them. You know, we do that here in Utah. And I don't know if COVID can take a turn for the worse and mess it up. Sometimes that's a fear, just practical stuff working or not, right?
Totally.
Like are we going to be able to, will I be able to go on book tour and connect with readers? I hope so. I couldn't really do that last year. It was all just online, and I like to connect in person. Like, writing is such a hermit job that there's a nice counterbalance that comes when I book tour and get to interact with actual people that is good for my soul. That's good for my heart.
Of
like
course.
like to have some human contact beyond my beloved family. And like so I have fears about that kind of stuff happening. Or if I start worrying about my kids, I can have fears about their future or about their safety. And I mean, that kind of stuff can always be there. But I'm trying really hard actually to not let those fears speak too loud. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard to hope for the best, because here's the thing, like the coward dies 1,000 deaths.
Yeah.
Right? The coward dies 1,000 deaths, but the brave man only has to die once. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to die 1,000 times. Like I want to, like, a lot of those fears are never going to happen. Like I'd rather deal with the bad things that actually happen versus the bad things that might happen. You know what I mean? And try to trust it'll be good, even though I know it isn't always good, but you hope for the best, right?
I like that, because it's just kind of like when you're constantly worrying, and then whatever event actually you're dreading happens, and then it passes. It's like, oh my gosh, I spent so much time and energy on something that I didn't even need to do, because the event came and went anyway.
It was totally optional pain that I subjected myself to, right?
Yeah.
And this is from a guy who probably worried himself to good grades through all of school and college and stuff. Like I mean, probably worry was the engine that powering my progress. But I think there's more pleasant engines to drive that progress, you know, than worry. So I'm trying to battle that one. Like
peace, you know, having peace be your engine, you know, that actually allows you to like accomplish things versus worry, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so last question for you. This Brandon Mull, this current version of Brandon Mull, what would you tell the younger Brandon Mull, the one that has not written Fablehaven yet, the one that just wrote the other end of Hippo because he felt inspired to write that story? Yeah.
If I could tell him, I would tell him, don't worry so much. You know what I mean? I tell him like enjoy the journey more. Like, just enjoy the journey. Just kind of trust that it'll work out. Like, do what you most love. Do what your heart tells you to do. Like do that thing that you almost don't dare to do it because it would be so great if it worked out. Do that. Like, do that and do it hard. Like, charge hard at it.
Yeah.
And like, do that thing that you deep down really want to do. Like, do that. And don't even worry that much, because if it doesn't work out, do something else. You know what I mean? Like, and it'll be part of a better journey than if you don't try those things that you most love.
Yeah.
And so like, I would try to tell him that. And I'd be like, someday you're going to have some books with the covers that your 10-year-old self dreamed would be on the covers of your books. With awesome dragons blowing fire and like cool things that you wished you would write about someday. Like, you're going to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so powerful, man. Like, I love your story. I love your story on so many levels, just because it's like you inspire everyone to like dream, and you're inspiring me to keep dreaming, you know? Like, I feel like I've had levels of success in my career as an actor, but you're inspiring me to keep going, you know? And the thing is like, you know, you and I have both chatted about this, how you'll never stop writing, and I hope you never do, because the thing is like, while you have imagination left, the world is made better for it if you can share that with the world. You know what I mean?
I sure hope so. Like, I feel like I've got lots of stuff in me. I told you earlier in the podcast, I think I'll die with lots of stories untold. And I hope that's true my whole life. I hope I'm overflowing with stories my whole life. And if I had $1 billion, I'd want to be doing the same day I do right now, which is writing stories, you know?
And so that's like, to me, that's a truly fulfilling career. You know what I mean? When you're able to like do something, regardless of the money that's already there or not there, you're still doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, living a life that you're happy you're living. I'm happy I'm living this life. I'm happy this is my job, and that makes me a rich person.
That's awesome. It's so perfect. Well, thanks, Brandon. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. October 26th is the date for Dragon Watch 5. We're very excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I can't wait to see if people like it, and if people haven't found Dragon Watch, hey, like if you liked Fablehaven, totally find Dragon Watch. It's a great ride. Like,
so what's the best?
The whole thing's going to be done now. You know.
So what's the best way for people to find you and find your work and all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to track me down, you can hop on Instagram, right? It's just, I think it's writer Brandon, or type in Brandon Mull, find me that way, or you can find me on Facebook. I've got a pretty big author page on Facebook. And there's also a brandonmull.com that has all the basics. But yeah, if you haven't tried any of my books ever, Fablehaven Book 1's a great place to start, or take a peek at the other books I've got, see if one makes you more interested than the others.
Yeah. No, I love it. That's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Brandon, for coming on the podcast. And we'll chat with you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks so much for listening to the Lemonade Stand podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use to be alerted when we release new episodes. We'd also love to hear your feedback in the reviews, and if you or someone you know has an awesome Lemonade Stand story, please reach out to us on social media and let us know. Thanks so much, and have a great day.